Hello Exiles, welcome to another exciting video from us here at North of Exile Games. Today is our second video in our three-part miniseries where we're taking a look at Genesis, Battle of Champions, the exciting tactical collectible card game from Haunted Castle Gaming. Now today we're going to be taking a look at the cards that you're going to see in the game. There's 6 types of cards between champions, spells, summons, techniques, alterations, and enchantments. We're going to be looking at what you need to do when you're deck building, the rules you need to follow. We're going to explain a bit the basic rules on how to actually play the game, all sorts of things. By the end of this video, the goal is you're going to have a pretty good idea of what it must be like to play the game Genesis, Battle of Champions. We want you to have a good idea of what you're in for so that you can make an informed decision on whether or not this is a new game that you want to start playing here at North of Exile Games. So the first thing that we need to talk about today is the fact that Genesis Battle of Champions is not just a collectible card game, it's a tactical collectible card game. Now what does that mean when we say tactical? Well, what it means is basically location is everything. Well, you may be familiar with other trading card games, collectible card games, where basically you'd sit down at a table, your opponent's across the table from you, and you build up armies of either friendly, funny, fuzzy creatures or magicians and wizards and monsters and whatnot. But either way, you'd be building up armies or teams of characters to attack and defend yourself with. And in your mind, you would just kind of imagine one army colliding with the other army in the middle of the table, and things would magically match up where the creature you wanted to block with would just magically be able to jump in front of the creature that the other player's attacking with. But here in Genesis Battle of Champions, there's a whole new level of strategy because location is everything, which means you're going to be playing the game on a 5x6 grid. And that means that where your characters are located on that grid is very relevant because they're only going to be able to do their attacks in certain areas of awareness. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about awareness later, but I think the first thing we want to do is when we're looking at the 6 types of cards that you can play with here in Genesis Battle of Champions, the first type we're going to talk about is the champion, because the champion is basically the most important card in your deck. The champion is the card that's going to determine what other cards you can play in your deck and probably what strategy you're going to employ while you're playing the game. So let's take a look for a second at a champion card from Genesis Battle of Champions. So what you're going to see here when you're looking at the card is I've got Raha in front of me. And as we're looking at Raha, you're going to notice that there are some lit up symbols on the right side of the card. Now these symbols reflect the affiliations that Raha is aligned with. Now what that means is in the game there are currently 4 affiliations, and each affiliation is basically a different style of play, a different focus. For Raha, the affiliations in play are going to be Bellum and Axon, which means the other 2 affiliations, Thymos and Chaos, cannot be used at all because Raha doesn't have an affiliation with those. And then now the next thing to talk about, now that we know what types of cards and what affiliation of cards I can put in my deck, is we need to talk about the actual deck itself. So basically, a deck in this game has to have exactly 50 cards. And they balance the cards that you put into the deck by adding a value to cards called a chi. Now you're going to see a chi cost in the top corner. Well, not necessarily the corner, but you're going to see a chi cost located near the top of every card you're going to see that you can add into the game. So here's an example of a chi cost. Now the costs can range from the cheapest, most affordable, and hence probably the weakest cards to play in the game, have a chi cost of 3. And then the biggest, most powerful, amazing cards in the game go all the way up to a cost of 8 chi. Now when you think about it, we know that a deck has to have exactly 50 cards, no more, no less. And then if you divide 250 chi spread out over 50 cards, that means you're looking at an average chi cost of 5 points per every card in your deck. That means if you add a card that has 6 chi on it, somewhere along the line you're going to have to swap in another card that only has 4 chi to balance it out, because again, you can't go over that 250 chi limit. So now we know that our deck is going to have exactly 50 cards. There's going to be a limit of 250 chi that we can spend on the cards that we put into the deck. We know that we are limited to certain affiliations based on the champion that we have. And then the next thing to talk about is the other stats that we've learned from looking at our champion. Now we're going to go back to our champion card for a second here, and you're going to see that there are 3 very important numbers located at the top of my Raha champion. The first number in red is the health total, the starting health total that I'm going to be beginning the game with playing as Raha. In this case, I have 22 health. The next number beside that in blue is the aura pool. Now, aura, you're going to want to think of this as points that you can spend on a one-time basis to cast spells or summon certain creatures, which in the game we actually call summons. Once you've used up these points, you don't have any more to spend unless you have ways to replenish the points in your aura pool. So that'll be a little bit of a strategy you might want to devise when you're putting cards into your deck. You might want to think about ways to get more aura back into your pool so that you can keep spending it, because this is a game where at the beginning of the game, you're going to have all your resources available to you, your entire aura pool, and you're going to have a lot of power coming out of the gate. But it's a game of endurance, whereas the game goes on, your resources start to dwindle. It gets harder and harder to cast your biggest, most exciting spells and summon your most exciting summons. So it's very much a game of endurance and survival, which is a different and interesting take on the game. The last number that you're going to see in green is the energy endurance reduction. So some cards in the game, for example, maybe certain attacks, don't just cost aura to use. Instead, some of them require energy. Now, energy manifests itself in this game as, if I have to pay 3 energy to do something, I'm going to take the top 3 cards off of my deck and put them into my discard pile. And in this case, there's a couple cool terms for the game. Cards that are in your hand, they're your thoughts. They're what you're thinking about, what you have access to. Cards that have been used up and are in your discard pile and gone, well, those are your memories now. They used to be thoughts, but now they're gone. Now they're memories. There's other cool terms that we'll talk about later. But basically what's going to happen is when we're talking about energy, if I want to use an attack, like let's say, for example, well, hey, looking at Raha, Raha has an attack, a powerful attack, called the area range attack, and it would deal 1 damage to everything in Raha's awareness. Now looking at the top of the card, you'll see Raha's awareness is lit up where Raha is the white dot at the bottom of that 3x3 grid. And you can see that Raha could affect up to 4 different locations on the grid. The 2 directly in front and 1 off to the left and right, 1 row ahead of Raha. So if we use this area range attack, we could hit up to 4 targets if they're located in the right places. Because that's a really powerful effect, it's going to cost me 3 energy, which means I'm going to be taking the top 3 cards off my deck and putting them right into my memory pile without getting the benefit of using them. That's how they balance out the more powerful abilities and attacks, is by making you use your energy. Now again, going back to the top of the card, Raha has an energy reduction cost of 1, which means instead of using 3 energy to do that attack, it would actually only cost me 2. And any other abilities on other cards in my deck that I've put that use energy would all be reduced by 1 as well. So there's a strategy sometimes based on who your champion is. If they have an energy reduction cost, then maybe you want to use a lot of cards that use energy in that. If you have a higher starting pool of aura to spend in the game, maybe go ahead and use some effects that use a ton of aura. And of course, your life total means how much can you risk it for the biscuit? How much energy or how much life do you have that you can afford to lose before you lose the game? Speaking of losing the game, there's only 2 ways to lose the game when you're playing Genesis Battle of Champions. The first way to lose would naturally be if your champion, which is you in the game, dies and has 0 health, you've lost the game. And the other way to lose the game is if at any point you've run out of cards in your deck. If they've all become memories and thoughts and there's no more cards left in your deck, you instantly lose the game. So those are the 2 ways to lose the game. Try and avoid both those things. Keep your champion alive and keep some thoughts ahead of you there in your deck, and you'll be just fine. So that's a good look at a lot of the things you need to know. We know now some of the restrictions on how we're going to build a deck based on the affiliations our champion has. We know that there's a limit of 250 chi to spend total on the cards that we're going to spend, and if you put in some really powerful cards that use a lot of chi, that means you need to also put in some weaker cards to save some chi to balance it out so that you stay under that 250 chi limit with your 50 cards in your deck. Now we've got a deck built and we're looking at the game, and hey, let's put up on the screen our arena, our play area, our 5x6 grid. When the game begins, each player is going to place their champion at opposite ends of the arena, looking at each other from a distance. Then you're going to determine who's going to be going first. I'm assuming probably with a dice roll or a coin flip or something of that nature, rock, paper, scissors, whatever. And then when the game begins, basically each turn is divided, well, each round, I should say, has turns in it. So you play in rounds, and whoever goes first in the first round of the game will wind up going first in every round throughout the game. What's going to happen is when you use abilities, eventually you're going to be exerting your characters. So if I'm Raha and I'm playing my first turn, I have a couple options here. I can go into my movement phase and move 1 or 2 steps. If I move only 1 step, up, down, left, or right, or I guess I should say forward, back, left, or right. If you move only 1 step, then you get to go into your main phase. And in your main phase, you get to use some attacks and abilities and things like that. If you want to be a little more aggressive, you can actually move 2 steps in your movement and skip your main phase altogether, and you go to your end phase. But don't worry, all is not lost, because when you get to your end step, while you can't do most things, you can still use any abilities that are called swift abilities. Here's the thing to know about swift abilities. Basically, swift abilities are so quick, these abilities, that you can respond to other people's actions with them. Let's say, for example, Malik attacks me, or attacks my character Raha with a big attack. I could, in response, if Malik's in the right place in my sphere of awareness, I could respond with swift abilities. Also, if I have any other creatures on the board, which are known as summons, if I've gotten new summons out on the board and they're scattered around, they would also have opportunities to respond to actions with any swift abilities that they have. So basically, again, to remind you, when your turn starts, you go into movement and you can either move 1 space or 2 spaces. If you move 2, you're going to skip your main phase. If you only move 1, you get to go into your main phase, which is where you're going to wind up doing a lot of things like heavy attacks, or maybe you're going to be summoning some creatures or putting out an enchantment, things like that. Then either way, you eventually get to your end phase where you can use any swift abilities. And then finally, whatever character is active at that time, if it's your main champion or if you were playing as one of your summons, whatever, when you're done your end phase for that character, then that character becomes exerted and they won't be doing anything else in that round. So my first character, Raha, would take all those actions, do all their things. Then we would go over to Malik on the other side of the table. They would do all their actions and whatnot. If I have any more summons on my side, then my secondary and third characters would get to do their actions, going back and forth, one on Team A, one on Team B, back and forth until everybody's exerted on the table. Then we start the new round by taking off all the exert tokens that we've marked our characters with, drawing a new card. You always draw a new card at the beginning of the round. Specifically, both players draw a new card at the beginning of the round. And then you go back in for another round. So I'm missing a couple things here and there with this, but I don't want to make this a 20-minute video. I want to explain to you the basics of how it goes so you have a really good idea visually in your mind of how to build a deck, what it might look like when you're playing. And then the next video you're going to see, our third and final video, is going to be myself versus my son Jaden. We're going to be playing a game of Genesis Battle of Champions. And I think just by watching a game get played, that'll also help fill in the blanks for you on the rules and that. So that's why we're not going to cover every single thing today in this video. We're going to keep it down and move on to the next video. And that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll stick around or come back later in the future when we get our third video up so you can see how the game goes between myself and Jaden. And hopefully you've enjoyed it, and let us know, please. Visit us on Facebook. We're listed as northofexilegames.com, or leave a comment here on the video wherever you may be seeing it, on Facebook, on YouTube, or wherever you find this video on the internet. And please let us know your feedback on how interested you would be in playing Genesis Battle of Champions, because we are looking at bringing in and all the excitement of Battle of Champions here to North of Exile Games. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Go North.